Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, and this is the 36th episode of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls, entitled, That Was Yesterday? How to Implement Forward-Looking Regulatory Solutions to Some of the Industry's Greatest Challenges. This podcast compilation of 4 episodes, 3 from season 7 and 1 from season 8, focuses on regulatory compliance issues, but is an amazing compilation of 4 in-depth, incredible conversations I had over the past few years. The 4 people I spoke with, first off, is Chilip. Chilip is a director of business development and alliances at LeapXpert. We spoke in April 2024, and we talked about why using the Telegram platform for compliant digital asset trading is the new frontier. So they focus on Telegram, they focus on digital asset trading, and check that out. All these podcasts, by the way, are available on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google, YouTube. Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, you can check these out. Second was a conversation I had with Tom Kiddle. Tom Kiddle is the co-founder at Palisade. We spoke in May 2024, and we talked about helping enterprises navigate MiCA. And MiCA's the markets in crypto assets regulation in Europe, by providing a comprehensive solution for managing digital assets. That was an amazing conversation in May 2024. And then 2 months later, also in season 7, the first 3 are always season 7, I talked to, and I'm going to hopefully pronounce his name properly again, Gijs Weegh, who is the CEO and founder at StablR. That was in July 2024. We talked about tackling the complexities of legally compliant fungibility for stablecoin issuers in Europe under MiCA regulations. So 2 of them dealt with MiCA. The last conversation, fourth and not final, but fourth and was a conversation I had in December 2024 during season 8. Before I went to video, and it was with Emeka Mgbenu, who is a senior product manager at Sumsub. We talked about how to help virtual asset service providers navigate the new travel rule requirements globally. So all these solutions and these regulatory issues, some of the biggest issues around the world, and we talked about solutions for those. So this is the 36th episode of 67 total, so more than halfway through the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. And again, the title of this is That Was Yesterday? How to Implement Forward-Looking Regulatory Solutions to Some of the Industry's Greatest Challenges. Enjoy. If you are interested in any of these clips, please check out the podcast in their entirety. Everything's available on Spotify and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you next time. You mentioned that sounds good for business and it sounds good for the trading firms. And you mentioned regulatory and compliance. So how, I know there's been, a lot of, I would say that Singapore and Hong Kong are more advanced as far as changing their regulations than the U.S. is. We're kind of wedded to 100-year-old laws here for some reason. But how do you help regulators and like Singapore MAS and Hong Kong Financial Conduct Authority? What are the benefits for them?
I think from the regulatory standpoint is, we have been recognized by a few of the banking regulators, including the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. We've been published on their website. for the latest RegTech developments, and we've won awards from there. I think the key is the market transparency. So they want to foster the innovation. They don't want to slow down innovation. At the end of the day, innovation creates opportunities for everyone in the market and all participants. But they want to make sure that the investors also protected. And part of that, obviously, is key is the communication. Obviously, they have many tools to look at transactions and data and financial information. But the key part with any financial regulatory body is that there is the audit trail, the records of all these investments and the discussions and the communications. So we've seen obviously a lot of headlines over the last few years about fraudulent behavior, scams, and other malfeasance within these emerging industries. And part of that, to bring it into the mainstream, is to really have the same protocols where you are having the same conversations being recorded prior to an investment or discussing an opportunity that you would expect with any financial services product. So they want to see that there are companies and technologies that really help and assist these new industries and these new financial services instruments, and we're part of that community. So really, the more we can do here, the more the regulatory bodies would engage. And obviously, they would like to promote their financial center as being a hub for a very transparent but still innovative ecosystem for these new assets.
You mentioned new products. I'm wondering, one of the big fights here in the U.S. is some people say there will never be a central bank digital currency. Hong Kong and Singapore are two countries that are looking to implement a central bank digital currency. How do you think that the improvement in the communication channels will help foster a positive experience with that product or others?
It's a little bit of irony, obviously. Some of the views of cryptocurrency and the whole DeFi communities that there isn't central bank control and it isn't governed by a particular country or government or traditional finance. So to me, it always boils down to the trust element. So you're going to trust to do business in a market, not just from the legal and financial health and well-being, but also that the regulators are on board. Right? We don't want to be in a situation where you invest with the potential that the regulators deem it to be not in the best interests of that market and puts your investments at risk. So part of that, again, is that communication side. So whether that is formalized and managed through a platform like LeapXpert or is basically used to create that market trust. So the trust is the element. Obviously, if we look back to the emergence of the cryptocurrency, it has been, borderless, as they say. But ultimately, the money has to land somewhere and it has to be regulated in a fashion. And part of that is all the financial services regulatory framework that goes around, obviously knowing your clients, knowing their risk appetite, but also having a record of those communications is being key.
The landscape needs to shift, right? You are a custodian, right?
Yes.
And it's important to reestablish, I'll use that word, reestablish, third-party trust.
Mm-hmm.
How is third-party trust going to drive success in the digital asset custody space going forward?
Yeah, this is a really good question and a really big deal for new entrants like Palisade. No one knew who Palisade was. We're only 2.5, 3 years old. And so trust is a really big factor here. I think first of all, credibility. When a business is trusted by third parties, such as clients or regulatory bodies, it enhances the credibility for the company, for custody, and also just generally for the market. If we are seen as credible and trustworthy as well, obviously there's a competitive advantage there as well. I think it certainly helps for us from our perspective with market expansion as well. As we become regulated in multiple jurisdictions, as we prove ourselves as a trustworthy digital asset custodian, we can start to expand into other markets too. And then finally, I think something that's really important to us is long-term partnerships and innovation. Palisade and digital asset custody, generally speaking, is a relatively sticky product. There's risk involved when you move your assets from one custody provider to another, and you never want to be in a position where a client feels like they have to do that. And so I think there is a very, very big element of credibility and trust that needs to be built in order for those long-term partnerships to be produced. And then obviously innovation as well. So I think trust encourages a lot of innovation, generally more broadly across the whole industry, not just with custody providers, but the more trusted third parties we have and companies building in the space, I think the more innovation we can see.
All right. I like the fact that you're willing to work with the regulators. There are advantages in doing that. There are also disadvantages. What do you feel like? I mean, over the past year, we had people, and my politicians here are going to hate me for this, but they said we had regulatory capture here in the United States. Mm-hmm. They're going to say, that wasn't regulatory. I'm going to say, yes, it was regulatory capture. But working within the confines of a regulatory system that is fairly and fully communicated to you has its advantages and disadvantages. What are they, and what must we now do to adopt and move forward?
That's a really good question. I think I'm quite conservative, in my approach to digital assets and innovation. I think innovation is incredibly important. Obviously, and we've seen a lot of that in the crypto space and blockchain space over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I think that being regulated, especially as a custodian, proves to your audience and your clients that you are mature and you're capable of holding assets. You've gone through the ringer, so to speak, with the regulator. They've put you through your paces. They have pulled apart your process. They've pulled apart your executive team. And they've essentially given you the stamp of approval to say, hey, look, we think that you're fit to do this. I think anyone that is building in the Web3 and crypto space that thinks that is not important, I think probably hasn't paid attention to how the financial services industry operates. We essentially have this whole new paradigm, right, around transferring value, creating value. I think it's naive to think that the market can operate in unregulated conditions. I think regulation is good for everyone when applied sensibly. And so I think it needs to be there. I don't think anyone would argue that it's a good thing, but it needs to be applied sensibly, and it also needs to allow for flexibility and future innovation.
When I got into crypto in 2017, I thought the easiest path forward for crypto was payments. I was wrong. It's the hardest path forward, right? What are some of the complexities of legally compliant fungibility for stablecoin issuers?
You immediately dive into the most interesting topic which came up with Emeka. It's the whole discussion about fungibility, but taking one step back, payments in crypto would be the obvious use case. I agree. I disagreed in 2017, by the way. I was working on the payment side of it, and I saw everybody talking about Bitcoin payments. I thought, why ever would you use this slow network with high fees to compete with our current payment rails? The payment rails was pretty good at that time. Stablecoin was volatile, slow, expensive, so I couldn't see it there. But I saw more the speculative and custody use cases there. When stablecoins came out, payments became a lot more clear for me, and the payment space in the future will, in my opinion, by far outpace in size the crypto market, because no matter how big the crypto market goes, the payment market will be bigger. Even if you want to buy crypto, you do a payment transaction, but we not only from now on for the rest of our lives only buy crypto, we also buy other stuff, which also payment transactions. So for me, by definition, the payment market is bigger in the longer term than the crypto market. The current opportunities within the crypto market. Going back to your question about fungibility, it's a very, very complicated topic. Because if we talk fungibility of stablecoins, for me, there are two aspects to that. First of all, you cannot make stablecoins not fungible, because that's how is it ever going to work on a global scale? We don't want to go back to put that many limitations onto blockchain, which was designed as an open network, which could be globally and efficiently used. If you put that much limitation to it by getting fungibility out, then we undermine the process, and I think you also undermine the regulation. So fungibility is good. It should be there. The question is, how can something be fungible if it's not the same? If you got two different assets, because one has a different demands than the other, are they really fungible? So that's for me the question is, are they fungible? Or what's the mechanism behind to create an open solution that can be used globally in an efficient way under different regulatory regimes? Time will tell how that works. It's also how Circle announced quite a lot around fungibility. It's interesting how that works out, because if you make it fully fungible, the regulations don't have a lot of value and a lot of worth in the market, because you can easily undermine them by issuing the same in a different jurisdiction and keep the monitored part really slow and do the far more majority in a less strict regulated or even unregulated space. So that's an angle you don't want to go to. So fungibility at a certain point would come, in my opinion, with adhering to the strictest regulations which are around. And if you adhere to those regulations, you have got full fungibility. But over time, that will work out more because it's a discussion which recently started. And we also have to see how regulators are going to work on fungibility. But I fully agree, it needs to be there in some way or form. But we also, if we think MiCAR and regulating the stablecoin and the crypto market is a good thing, we should also keep in mind that there should be something to have regulatory oversight over. With fungibility, that could become very small. So it's a level playing field, and I'm actively following how that works out and where the opportunities are around it.
Interoperability is one knowledge gap, right? And you're working to that and to make a solution for that. But I'm sure there are other knowledge gaps. What are they? And then I want to get into your course after we talk about what those knowledge gaps are.
Yeah, so aside interoperability, I think the main knowledge gap is really just around what this is and why it's important. I think for context on the surface, the name is very somewhat deceitful. I've had people walk up to me at conferences, asking about, is this a travel, when we say travel rule, crypto travel rule, they're asking, is this a crypto experience company that can allow me book flights? So first of all, the name is quite misleading, because again, it's a pretty new regulation that isn't quite mainstream. So the first knowledge gap is actually breaking down and understanding what the concept is, educating people on what the concept is, why it's important, or what are the implications for not, doing X, Y, Z, for not meeting these requirements. So that's the first step. New concept, we have to educate, so it becomes, very mainstream at the back of our minds. Now, a second challenge will definitely be the interoperability issue, which is what we've raised in the past about, we've talked about it quite a bit, about there being so many different protocols that don't talk to themselves, and VASPs are kind of left holding the bag in terms of, what do they do next. And then the third thing I would definitely say would be, in a lot of regulations, there is something that is called like a risk-based approach, which is basically when your regulators tell you, here you have a blank check, try to do everything possible to ensure that you are safe. We're not going to tell you exactly what to do, but based on these scenarios, do everything within your best interest to, prevent fraud, so to speak. Now, a risk-based approach is very broad, and sometimes VASPs need help in terms of, first of all, defining what a threshold is, or what countries they are willing to work with in terms of, where the VASPs are domiciled, or which type of users should they allow to send transactions above a certain amount. So it is this extreme customized risk approach that sometimes gets muddied up and is very confusing. In typical compliance, it's always a red, go, red, stop, green, go. If there's XYZ signals, stop. If there's ABC signals, go. But with travel rule, it is very complex. There's so many things you have to consider. The risks of the VASPs themselves. Is a VASP risky? Have they been in the news for, fraud or anti-money, or, data privacy concerns? Is the user itself risky? Did they register from a country that you're not quite sure of? Is the amount in question suspicious? Based on the user's historical transaction, is this an anomaly? Is this normal? So there's lots of different scenarios that VASPs have to do to ensure that they are safe. And again, this is a problem, and this is also somewhere where Sumsub is also focused on in terms of solving this for VASPs by giving them the tools to, first of all, define what these very complex parameters are, and then automate the process over time. Yeah, we will stick with 3 for now. I think that should be sufficient.